Well, hello and welcome everyone. We're excited for this conversation to hear from both state partners and then our county panelists today. Samantha Foster just mentioned in the chat, but if you have any technical difficulties, please reach out to her directly in the chat and we can help get that sorted. So we're excited for the conversation, so we'll just jump right in. I'll just go over the agenda, and then I'll turn the time over to our partners. So we have it set up to do a brief introduction. We'll hear from Stephanie Welch, who's joined us today. And then we'll have a roundtable with our state stakeholders, including agency, the Judicial Council, the State Bar of California, and DHCS. Then we'll have share some of the results that we found from our Q2 survey with counties on their implementation status. And then move into our county panel, hearing what's working for them, challenges they faced, how they've overcome them, and some other things that would be useful for other county panelists to hear. Please continue or add questions to the chat as we go. We'll try to answer questions as we can. We've reserved some time at the end for Q&A, but please feel free to submit your questions throughout, and we'll try to get to them as we can or follow up after if needed. So with that introduction, I want to turn the time over to Stephanie Welch, who will give us a welcome, and then we'll turn it over to Laura Collins, my colleague, to start asking questions. Stephanie?
Good morning, and good morning, everybody who's joined us today. Thank you for your time and your attention and your commitment to this particular effort. I think if I've learned anything about CARE Act implementation so far, it's really has been this opportunity to reach, in many cases, a population that we are designed to serve, especially as part of the county behavioral health family. And yet we don't always have the right tools at our disposal. And we've learned so much about some of the individuals who have gone through the CARE process so far. And it's really not all that different than the work you do every day, really giving hope and a sense of belonging and a sense of place for individuals who in many cases have had a number of really negative life experiences and potentially even negative experiences seeking treatment for their behavioral health conditions. So I am in awe of the people that I've met in our early start counties who are doing this work on the ground. They have really inspired me in the work that we do here at the Health and Human Services Agency. So I'm very appreciative to have the opportunity to be here today and to always make sure that at the agency level that we are listening and that we are accessible and constantly learning as we implement this new significant act. So with that, I'll pass it over to Laura.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. And yeah, let's continue the conversation. So thanks for that nice introduction. Welcome. So I have a few questions, or our team has a few questions for you to get the discussion going today. So I guess first off, clearly, you've been, fully engaged with the Cohort 1 and other counties that have also gone live with CARE Act, and would love to hear more about what you're hearing from those counties that have already gone live, successes, barriers, strategies. Just love to hear a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, first, I think, speaking of successes, the majority of those petitions have been filed by family members and are also reflective of the demographics of the community. Those were two things that we expected. We were hoping for the latter, and I think that's something that we continue to really keep our eye on. But also at this point in the process, kind of expect that some of the petitions would be more diverse than just family members. And I will spend some time talking about that today. One of the things that has been, and we also expected, which is why, as I'm sure for those of you who are participating in this particular webinar know, that there are voluntary off-ramps to accessing care. And so Counties have seen a lot of exciting successes in that space, still working with populations who may be hesitant or resistant or uninterested, whatever reason might be, to not engage in services, that this has really given them an opportunity to have a rich experience, most often with really seasoned outreach workers, people who, again, like I have mentioned, I've been so impressed by their own personal journeys. Many of them have a variety of different types of lived experience, not just with behavioral health conditions, but maybe with homelessness, maybe with justice involvement, maybe with specifically with substance use challenges. And so I think they really bring a sense of authenticity and connectedness and an ability to really help someone through this journey in this process of help seeking. So that's been really engaging to see, and great stories there about people who really have some unique skills when it comes to engagement for individuals who are not necessarily interested in seeking services. So I think also just really excellent coordination between the county and the civil court partners. You're going to hear from our partners that we work with regularly here at the state level, the Judicial Council, but really the approach has been, and this is what has been so creative about the CARE Act process. Yes, there is a civil court proceeding, and that is something that it really provides accountability on both sides for the system that's responsible for serving individuals and for the individuals who we hope to serve. And what has been really interesting and creative is we all know that for any of us, including, I'll speak for myself, going through any kind of a court proceeding could make you nervous or anxious. And so we've really worked hard, and they've worked incredibly creatively to find ways to kind of bring the court into the community. Do we really need to have formalities like that we're familiar with when it comes to court proceedings, or can we really make these more accessible by hosting court, say, for example, in a multi-purpose center in a building that people find accessible in the community? Or can the court literally become mobile and do outreach to the individuals who are living in the community who may, frankly, not want to walk into a courtroom, or just literally find it complicated to get to a courtroom? So that's been really interesting, and to see that kinds of creativity and that really kind of partnership with all of the partners at the table, including the presiding judge over the court process, but also county counsel and the public defender and the county staff. And when I say county staff, really bringing the whole county family that is going to be serving this individual. So behavioral health is there with their partners who provide social services and housing, including their public guardian and whoever is overseeing conservatorship proceedings, and really thinking about how, as a county family, people can work together to serve people who are most at risk and are, of course, meet the target criteria for care. I think the other thing that's been really exciting to hear is a lot of people who have been passionate about working with this population. Again, we are talking about a very small but critical population that we serve in county behavioral health. So people who are living with schizophrenia or other psychotic spectrum disorders who are at great risk of conservatorship, incarceration, or long-term institutionalization. And I think we have to keep that front and center when we think about this as an opportunity and a tool to use to reach a population who, quite frankly, as we have seen, and to be honest with the folks on the webinar, there have been some negative outcomes during the engagement process. People have unfortunately been arrested during the process, or have even been hospitalized on holds, because that's how acute some of these individuals are. And so timing really is of the essence. And it is my transition to talking about barriers, but I do think that we are seeing that the staff themselves, and in particular, I'll and it's kind of the hat that I wear, the behavioral health staff themselves are really stepping up and trying to find incredibly creative ways to reach people, to find people, and to engage them quickly, because there is such a risk of something, negative happening to the individual. We've seen people get evicted, as I mentioned, arrested. And so the talents and tools that the staff are coming up with in order to get to people before those negative outcomes happen has been really impressive. But that being said, the barriers are really that we are working with a high acuity population. That was by design so that we were focused and there wasn't an overwhelming number of people, and that the intervention that you all would be putting together through your care plans and your care agreements would be this robust set of services like ACT level services that were really high intensity and high touch, and that those would be really effective for a population that has really high needs. And so, but that's hard to do. And so I do think that has been a challenge, but also an incredible opportunity, especially as we will be transitioning over the implementation of behavioral health transformation to introduce more ACT level of care services through our changes in our Medi-Cal program with our BH Connect waiver. And so really is an entree to doing that work, which many counties have been doing for a long, long time, but maybe not all of the staff that have wanted to work on those teams have had an opportunity to work on an ACT model team and have found that very rewarding, is what I have heard so far. I do want to also talk about that, and potentially Judicial Council will touch on this, but by design, purposefully, it is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to do, to submit a petition. I think we're still trying to figure out ways in which that can be something that is not as arduous as it currently is. The self-help centers, which I'm sure you'll hear about with the Judicial Council's presentation, do an amazing job walking family members through how to complete a petition, especially when they may feel as if they don't have the appropriate information. We don't want anyone to be discouraged. We want them to be supported if they think that they should be submitting a petition. But I think one of the things that we've definitely learned is that there are just so many different people who maybe don't know that they even could be a potentially strong petitioner. For example, thinking about somebody who is, working every day on a crisis team. Maybe that particular crisis team member is not the actual petitioner, but they are coming into contact with an individual who is in crisis repetitively, and not getting access to treatment. How can they be making referrals, for example, to county behavioral health to file a petition themselves? And so I think we're really trying to think of all of those systems that unfortunately may be touching this person and their lives, but not in the way that we would want them to, right? They're getting arrested, they're getting hospitalized. And we want to make sure that we're using care as a way to avoid those things. So how do we actually work with some of those system partners responsibly to make sure that we're identifying these individuals if they're appropriate for care? So that, I think, is a huge barrier that is also a tremendous opportunity that we're working through now, and talking to HMA about some unique or new or revised types of training. So I think the last thing that I would say real quickly is with behavioral health bridge housing, and now with the passage of Prop 1, which will include an ongoing ability for counties to utilize Behavioral Health Services Act dollars for housing intervention, including things like rental subsidies and other supports to keep people stable in housing. We're just seeing some really creative ways to make housing available sooner rather than later. And I have to give a shout out to the smaller and medium-sized counties who have really, gone in there and rolled up their sleeves and have found creative ways to take, former roadside motels, or maybe it was a no longer being used adult skilled nursing facility, and to rehab it and get it ready for CARE Act participants. And so very excited about sharing some of those lessons learned with all of you, because housing is so essential to to caring for people who are going through the care process.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. The only other question that comes to mind is is there anything that you want to say or speak to, maybe briefly, about any legislative or funding changes that may impact care?
Yeah, I mean, I touched a little bit on how I think actually Prop 1 is an opportunity. Prop 1 in combination with BH Connect for our county behavioral health family out there really, to me, are like two major puzzle pieces coming together, of which it gives a lot more support to all of you to really have the resources to provide intensive services to people who have very serious behavioral health and substance use disorder conditions. And so with that, I think also, while we are learning that while the majority of people who are going through the care process actually do not have housing or stable housing, there are plenty of people who are housed. But I do think that having the ability through the BHSA to provide some housing supports to this population is essential to their overall stability and long-term recovery in the community and living in community-based settings versus revolving in and out of institutions. So very excited about that opportunity. I would say that there is cleanup legislation to the CARE Act. It is SB 42. And I think that between ourselves and the Judicial Council, there have been some things that we've learned along the way. Certainly, this is legislation that's being carried by a legislature in Southern California, in Orange County. But there are some technical things that we've learned that we hope that we've addressed in making some recommendations on what was changed to support enriched engagement on your end, our ability to maybe collect some data that we really want and need so that we better understand implementation, and then also making and providing a referral pathway for those entities who come in most contact with people who are in crisis with severe mental health conditions. So I'm losing my voice. I apologize. But and then I think I know that I'm a little bit over, Laura, but did want to point out that at agency, we do work with NAMI California to make sure that we're providing communities and families with resources, including what we're learning is a lot of people are just help seeking and care is not the appropriate tool for their loved one. And we would hope that for all of you out there, that if you have a local NAMI, that you're partnering with them, which I feel pretty confident that you are, but also if you're a smaller community and you might have a smaller NAMI, please rely on us and our relationship with the statewide NAMI to give you some additional support in reaching out to families and educating the community. And so there's a website that is available, and I'm sure that we can put that in the chat or something along those lines, Laura.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. Really appreciate the updates and the insights as well. Let's move to Judicial Council. We have Charlie Deppner, who's the director of Judicial Council of California, and we'd love to hear from you, Charlie. And let's start with the self-help centers that Stephanie referenced, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about how self-help is providing the support to families and other stakeholders in the counties. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you for having me. And I'm going to demote myself. I'm not the director of the Judicial Council, but I'm the director of the Center for Families, Children in the Courts. It's my pleasure to serve in that capacity. So self-help has been an essential service in the court system for a couple of decades now. And self-help centers or services are in every court. So if you go to your court website, you can find out how to contact them. But they don't represent people. They're not the attorney. They don't tell you how to run your case, but they do almost everything else to get you comfortable with the process and show you how to do a petition and how to serve and everything you can possibly imagine. They do it. And so where our goal is going through this process, that you would be able to understand the process, understand the language, look at the forms, just be competent to be able to do and to go through this process. And in many cases, once people do that, they find that they don't really want to do a petition, or it's not right for them, or they don't qualify. And self-help can also then do referrals for them to resources that will be helpful to them to continue to seek help. So self-help centers are very, the self-help centers were the first to step up and say, tell me all about the CARE. We want to learn. They've been trained not just in the law, but how to work with this population. They're really pros, and they completed one-day-long seminars recently, just to get all of their questions answered. And because every court is a little bit different, to figure out how their court fits into the process for CARE. They also are, in some centers, able to connect people who decide not to petition with behavioral health directly. So they're there for full service.
Wonderful. Thank you for that overview. We're also really interested in hearing about, how Judicial Council is helping the courts prepare for implementation in Cohort 2, and some of that cross collaboration work that's happening. The strategies for preparation. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I think one of our great assets is the collaboration we have with your group and with everybody working on the HHS side. You've been great partners. And I think particularly in this training phase, just sharing information about how courts are doing, what problems they're encountering in implementation, is teaching us all a lot about how the courts work and the really terrific job that they do. So this forum is one of the things that we do to collaborate with you to just make sure that people get a sense of the whole picture. And that's something that has to go throughout the process at the local level as well. And so we're doing a lot to try to encourage that. In addition to that, we have to big thanks for the Cohort 2 courts. They've been really generous with their time to also speak, to work on trainings, and to just share what they know. They have invited other courts to come and watch their process, and everything we can do to just make it comfortable for the courts coming on. And in addition to that, we now have an arsenal of toolkits, webinars that show the whole court process, and flowcharts. So there's many, many resources that the courts can find on the JRN or on our public site.
Thanks so much for that. Is there anything else you want to say about your experience so far with the counties in terms of how the courts are engaging, especially the smaller counties, the smaller courts?
I think they're teaching us, and we are making calls. We're in the process of calling all of the courts and learning that, the old saying, if you've seen a small court, you've seen a small court, you haven't seen the whole thing. And so this has really been a great education for us with the small courts to find out where their challenges are. And honestly, what they're trying to do is take a process that's designed primarily for middle-sized and large courts. What do you do if you are anticipating 5 cases this year? How do you make that work? And I think that people are doing a lot of thinking about collaboration, but just turning to courts who are implementing or have implemented to get ideas for how to do this, and we're there to help them do that.
Thank you so much, Charlie. In the interest of time, we're going to move to Helen Yu, who's the Senior Program Analyst with the State Bar of California. And we have a few questions for you, Helen, regarding the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission work. And I'll just get started.
Great. Thanks for having me.
I don't know why what?
And so Helen, thanks for being here. We'd love to hear from you, next steps, timelines, that counties can be aware of around, the RFP results and funding.
Yeah, happy to share. I'll start by giving just a brief overview of what the funding looks like for Respondents Council. So of course, the Budget Act provided the funding for care services statewide, and for Respondent Council, those counties, Cohort 2 counties, well, actually all counties have a spend down date until January 1st, 2026. So the Budget Act provides at least $16,750,000 for respondent representation, and then up to $838,000 for training and technical assistance. As far as the RFP results, the Legal Services Trust Fund, they delegated authority to what we call the Legal Services Trust Fund Care Court Grants Committee to administer the RFP, to review them, and then to provide recommendations and approval for those awards. So the RFP was released on April 11th, and then it closed on May 10th. The Legal Services Trust Fund Commission, they approved the award amounts and the amounts for the county public defenders. As you all may know, if no qualified legal services project, which are the legal services nonprofits, if they don't apply for care court funding, those counties would automatically appoint their public defender for those respondent representation services. So for the care court grant, the commission approved 4 grants total. They would be for San Bernardino County, San Francisco County, and San Mateo counties. For San Francisco County, 2 qualified legal services projects applied and were awarded grants. And those 2 QLSPs, acronym for short, they're already providing those representation services for 23-24. San Mateo County is launching early. So for Cohort 1, LA County and San Mateo County, the funding period started July 1st. And then for the rest of the counties, the funding period will start on October 10th. The October 1st. The October 1st start date does provide 2 months of what we call startup costs, and those are to support counties in their implementation of the CARE Act. That may be attending meetings with courts or the behavioral health agency, so that they can have the funds to do that.
Thank you. Lots of information. Thanks, Helen. Any other sort of frequently asked questions that you want to speak to while we've got you today?
Yeah, I could talk about what it looks like for the upcoming months for the public defender offices as well as the QLSPs. So in the next upcoming months, we'll set up the Cohort 2 public defender offices with access to a portal that we call Smart Simple. That's our grants management portal where all the public defender offices and QLSPs can do all their reporting. We'll continue. We've been doing a lot of outreach and meeting with offices to offer technical assistance. I know a couple of counties have mentioned that they'll be taking trips out to Cohort 1 counties to either to go to a court day to see what that's like. Other counties are doing mock care court days to help with their implementation. We're also working on finalizing the funding agreements for all of the remaining counties. And then we'll have a couple of webinars scheduled to go over the reporting portal, the requirements, and then of course, just offer technical assistance as needed.
Thank you so much, Helen. And I did see, I think, at least one question in the chat directed to you from Humboldt. If you could speak to that, or actually just respond to it in the chats. And I guess we can move to...
Yeah, I'll respond in the chat.
Yeah, that would be great. And yeah, let's move to DHCS. So we've got Casey Heinzen on. He's the Community and Crisis Care Programs Branch Chief Medi-Cal Behavioral Health Policy Division. Did I get it right, Casey?
You nailed it. It's a mouthful. I get it wrong about half the time. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you for everyone joining us today, and really for all of the participation in the many TTA opportunities that HMA and DHCS have out there. Also want to thank Cohort 1 counties in particular for participation in many of our trainings and often serving as panelists, which I know we greatly appreciate, and I'm sure Cohort 2 counties appreciate as well. And I just kind of quickly wanted to discuss, or at least provide an overview of what DHCS's role and responsibilities are in the CARE Act, because it's a little bit different, I think, than some of the other initiatives that DHCS oversees. And so just stepping back a little bit, DHCS, as I'm sure most of you know, is a department within the California Health and Human Services Agency, and we primarily finance and administer a wide range of healthcare programs in initiative, including CARE Act, Medi-Cal, Behavioral Health Bridge Housing, BCHIP, block grants, and the list goes on and on. It's actually difficult to keep track personally. And in my time and my many years here at DHCS, I've actually had the privilege of working on a wide range of those initiatives, Medi-Cal, block grants, so on and so forth. And our role in administering CARE Act is a little bit different in the sense that for some of those other initiatives, we kind of set out the parameters of the program. We may be issuing funding for the program, but for the CARE Act, we kind of have two or three main roles, right? The first role is to provide training and technical assistance to support the CARE Act implementation, and primarily helping counties, helping council, helping volunteer supporters in understanding their roles in the CARE Act, and again, ultimately with the North Star of helping with implementation, right? And that can mean a wide range of things. And so whatever it is that is required of us, we're just trying to get there, trying to move the needle to help everybody in understanding what we can all do better in helping this program succeed. And so some of that training, like I mentioned, is provided to council, right, regarding care processes and care services, and even, the other supports that are available. And we do everything in consultation and coordination with many other state departments, a wide range of stakeholders who are invaluable in developing a lot of this guidance, which sometimes is, outside of our wheelhouse that we're not experts on. We work really regularly with the Judicial Council. We try to provide as much consultation to them as possible as they provide their training technical assistance to judges. And apart from the training and technical assistance aspect, DHCS is responsible for developing an annual report that we'll post to the DHCS website. And that annual report is intended to provide information on the effectiveness of the CARE Act model, but specifically in improving outcomes for CARE Act participants. And then the other aspect of reporting is contracting with an independent evaluator that will provide an interim 3-year evaluation and then a final 5-year evaluation of the CARE Act model. And that provides kind of an overall assessment of the program. And again, conducted by an independent contractor who DHS is currently contracting the RAND Corporation on that. And then some of our partners in our fiscal side of the house, we administer some of the startup funds, the CARE Act Accountability Fund, and then some of the other ongoing mandated costs like administrative cost support, and so on. And so it's kind of the umbrella of things that we do for the CARE Act. Again, a little bit different than some of the other initiatives, but that's where we kind of slot in there. And I think probably a decent nutshell of DHCS's role in this effort. So maybe we can go to questions.
Sure. Yeah. And you actually sort of covered that first question I was going to ask about, your approach to supporting implementation. And I think we got a good overview of the care team with DHCS's approach. Unless there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I can expand on it a little bit. And, I think it is important to note that while DHS is kind of at the center in terms of responsibility in developing a lot of the training and technical assistance, or TTA, we do collaborate with a lot of partners, right? Both in public service, right? So other state departments, county behavioral health agencies, but also in the last year in particular, we met with CBHDA, with CSAC, MHS, OAC, CPEN, right? And the list again goes on and on to try and inform our approach to developing our TTA and our policy guidance, right? There's so much that we don't know, and we know that we don't know, that we want to be very intentional and strategic about making sure that we've left no stone unturned, and that we're trying, again, to make the CARE Act be implemented to its fullest potential, right? And so that's, in the past year, a lot of it was fact finding, ensuring we have the right people at the table. And then in this upcoming year, we're going to continue to strengthen those partnerships, right? We've made those connections, we've established some of the meetings and those lines of communication. We're going to continue to work on those and participate in stakeholder meetings. And I think it's important now. We're kind of at this phase where we have information, right? We have information on, challenges that counties and providers and supporters are facing in the implementation of care, but there's also successes, right? And we want to hear more about these things so that we can continue to customize our training and technical assistance based on that knowledge, right? And, that continuous quality improvement, that we're trying to add to this effort. And so, that's kind of the upcoming year. So I'm sure there'll be lots of notices about opportunities to participate in some more stakeholder meetings, but we're going to continue to be busy in that way.
Thank you so much, Casey, for that great update. I am going to go ahead and pass the mic over to my colleague, Amanda Turnen, to talk a little bit more about what HMA is doing with DHCS in terms of the CARE Act TTA work. Amanda?
Great. Thank you, Laura. So I'm going to go over a few slides based on the survey that we sent out last quarter. We can go to the next slide. So beginning in 2024, HMA started administering a quarterly implementation status survey to the Cohort 2 counties. So for the Q2 survey, which was sent out in July, we did have 92% of the counties, of Cohort 2 counties respond. So we had 46 out of 50 Cohort 2 counties respond, which is great. And what this figure is showing, and it does compare from the Q1 survey results to the Q2 survey results, based on the question for the county to report on the option that best fits their progress towards CARE Act implementation. So as you can see, we went up from Q1 to Q2 on the number of counties reporting being on track to implement by December 1st. So went from 62% to close to 74%. Counties who reported being behind schedule, but still felt like they could implement on time, decreased from Q1 to Q2. And for the counties that did report results in Q2, no counties reported being concerned that they would not be able to implement on time, which is great. These counties are, the survey is sent through our county assigned HMA liaisons, and then, each county provided a response to that implementation status survey. We will have a Q3 survey that will go out in September of 2024. So the next slide also shows the trend from Q1 to Q2. And this question had to do with what implementation activities have taken place or are actively taking place to date. And so most counties have been really participating in workflow development and communication planning and staffing and housing development planning compared to the previous quarter. We still are just about over half of counties that are engaging in IT and data planning and education and training to stakeholders. So those two activities have lagged behind a little bit. You note the bottom line where it says other activities. So some of these activities reported included legal representation activities, workload projections, utilizing staff to meet the needs in small rural counties, contract development, judicial processes, and procurement for contracted providers. What I will highlight is that 25 counties reported that fostering a collaborative relationship with the court and other partners is moving towards implementation efforts for the most. So collaboration efforts in general were really cited as being the biggest success towards implementation. We also had 19 counties report that they are meeting regularly, either in large groups or subcommittees, and that really is supporting implementation. Additional counties did state that establishing clear goals and assigning responsibilities, as well as accessing available resources, either through HMA liaisons or the CARE Act Resource Center website, have been keys to success. So the trends are really moving in the right direction, and you can see big jumps between Q1 and Q2. On the next slide, counties also had the opportunity to respond to some open-ended questions regarding some challenges that they might be having. And for Q2, the majority of the challenges focused on variability and projecting volume of petitions, trying to balance the need for data collection while also making care forms patient-centered, as well as just the level of effort in general to prepare for data collection. Counties still reported concerns with staffing shortages and concerns for existing staff capacity, as well as competing priorities from state initiatives. And some counties reported timeline concerns for the Smart Care EHR configuration, which impacts about close to 50% of the counties. So HMA worked with the counties and provided TA reports back to the counties for each county that submitted a survey result, and really provided some direction. We have been conducting targeted outreach to counties. We've also been doing additional TTA activities related to IT and data planning. We've incorporated a lot of learnings from Cohort 1 counties. We've done open forums where we've had Cohort 1 county panelists, both for workflows, for court collaboration, as well as data collection and reporting. And we do continue to include staffing considerations in the TA activities. On the next slide, the counties also reported on which resources and or trainings that they were most interested in. And so many of the items that were requested on the survey results have already been addressed at this point. But back in June, HMA and Judicial Council hosted an open forum on cross-sector collaboration. And this was a panel of county BH and court representatives from Cohort 1 to share best practices and lessons learned. We heard back from a lot of Cohort 2 counties that may have not been able to participate or wanted to rewatch that. And so we did share that recording with those counties as requested. We also had the Local Governmental Financing Division release their BINs, BIN 24014 and 015, which gave the information on the CARE Act sanctions and claiming process. So in partnership with LGFD, HMA created an asynchronous training regarding the sanctions and claiming process. And then that included a demonstration of submitting claims to DHCS for reimbursement. And then we also partnered with LGFD to host 2 office hours in July that allowed counties to come and attend and ask additional questions. Data collection and reporting has been a huge topic for all Cohort 2 counties. And so we did create a new landing page on our CARE Act Resource Center that made it a lot easier to find data collection and reporting specific resources. We also added a lot of different categories within the data specific FAQ section. And then back in May, the data group had hosted a data affinity group panel, which again included lessons learned from our Cohort 1 counties. And I can't continue, just emphasize that Cohort 1 counties have been so gracious on their time to participate in so many of these panels and trainings. And so the HMA data team did prepare kind of a lessons learned from counties that have already implemented CARE from the data collection and reporting lens. And that resource is now available to all the Cohort 2 counties. As the previous slide showed, there is a communications toolkit. And that toolkit we developed because we did hear from counties, especially smaller counties, that they needed some assistance in, how to get the word out among their community to different stakeholders. And so this toolkit, not only does it include templates materials that can be customized and branded by the counties, but it also includes an overview of communication strategies. And we have heard from many counties that it was very helpful. And then for the FAQ landing page, this was recently updated on the CARE Act Resource Center that included an easier search functionality. So you have the ability to click on a topic to filter FAQs and link to specific categories. And that has helped counties really be able to find a specific FAQ much easier when they have additional questions. And the last slide, I'll just continue to give a plug to our CARE Act Resource Center. I hope everyone has had an opportunity to go into the CARE Act Resource Center. It includes all of our training and resource libraries. So any asynchronous training, any live training that we conducted and posted, all the PDFs have our talking points and they're tagged for accessibility. We also provide resources that have been created by not only the HMA TTA team, but also our partners like Judicial Council and agency, NAMI, et cetera. Any upcoming trainings and opportunities are also included on this CARE Act Resource Center. And additionally, the county directory is one thing I'll flag. So not only does it have links to the self-help centers, but as each county launches their own specific CARE Act website, and sometimes that's both the BH, county BH as well as court. Sometimes it's one or the other. But as those are launched, we are including those links on our county directory. So if your county's working on getting your own website up and ready, we encourage you to take a look at what some of the other counties have done. As your county does launch your website, please share that link with us and we'll make sure that we add it to our CARE Act Resource Center as well. And there's always an opportunity to get in contact with us by joining the listserv and requesting TA. And you can always send us an email at info@careact.org. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Patricia, for the exciting part of today to hear from some county panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. And thanks to everyone from our state partners. And we want to turn and talk to our county panelists today. So we're here joined by representatives from different counties and different stages of their implementation. So we'll speak to them in this order, but feel free to add questions in the chat and share things that have been helpful for you as well. So let's start with Kern. Awesome. So Emily, thanks for joining us today. We wanted to hear about your planning process and speaking to collaboration strategies that you would recommend to other counties. It seems like there's some good collaboration happening in Kern.
Absolutely. Just to provide a brief introduction, Emily Lyles, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm the administrator for Kern's adult system of care. And so basically, I was excited to hear what Amanda with HMA had to share, because a lot of that information is similar to what I have to share. Our Kern County started about 1.5 years ago, really leveraging our existing partnerships in our community with the courts, with our county council, with NAMI, and various different community partners that would be involved in this, that we had existing due to our AOT program and other programs in our crisis services division. And so we started meeting bi-weekly, and ever since then, when it, being a part of the Cohort 2 counties, we realized, okay, at this point in time, we need to move these meetings to less educational and informative meetings to more action-oriented meetings of, looking through the implementation guideline, giving action steps to different partnering agencies, and really working towards getting the steps in place.
Thank you, Emily. You also mentioned pursuing an MOU with the courts to help smooth out and just clarify the sharing of information, and specifically around PHI. Can you speak more about what you're thinking and where you are in the process?
Right. Well, looking through the Senate bill, it does appear that there's some language in there that alludes to the information sharing. And in Kern County, we like to be very conservative with the information being shared and exchanged, and realize that there's still a level of accountability for us as a department to ensure we're releasing the minimum amount necessary to get the work done. And so one thing that we are in the process of doing is working with our county council, and specifically our council who oversees HIPAA and information sharing and exchanging, to put in place an MOU. So there aren't concerns surrounding that portion of this program.
And anything that you could share for other counties who are interested in doing this, what you've learned pursuing this?
Well, I've learned that there aren't, through different forums and meetings regarding care, that there haven't been a lot of counties that have pursued actually putting in place an MOU. If there's someone out there on this meeting who has, please feel free to reach out to me as we navigate through this process. But one thing I've found helpful is really the collaborative piece with our council, because at this point in time for Kern, we're on a short timeline. We're hopeful we will be implementing in October of this year. And so this is something that I'm really keeping in communication with our council with, and maybe even having them help draft up what they think seems to be appropriate.
And then there was a question about data collection and reporting in the chat. Maybe you could respond after a few of our questions if you have thoughts about the data collection reporting. But I wanted to circle back on some of the challenges in Kern that you spoke to and what you guys are thinking about how to respond. You mentioned some misperceptions around care and who it's for, and putting out materials to help correct that.
Right. So I think a couple main spots for us would be collaboration, communication, and education. And not only anytime a new program comes out, we in the mental health world, we hear about it. We're the ones developing and implementing these programs. It doesn't necessarily mean the community's hearing about it, or some of our partnering agencies, like in CARE's situation, maybe petitioners, right? So I feel it's really up to us, our responsibility, to make sure our community is aware and that we're able to address any misconceptions. One forum we were able to do that in, which I'm really thankful for HMA and our Kern County liaison, Matt Sandoval. I can give a big shout out to him because he has been so helpful along this Road to Care Act. We had the opportunity to speak at our Aging and Adult Services conference. And then about a month ago, I spoke at the American with Disability Acts conference on a panel. And a big misconception, there were a few in our community, the main one being that this was purely about homelessness and for anyone who was homeless. A lot of the community members weren't aware of some of the inclusion criteria required to be included in this program. And they weren't aware that, we have a whole spectrum of services that we will try to engage these individuals in voluntarily first prior to going to court. And many times we're successful with that. So it was actually a chance to provide education, not only about the CARE Act and being about treatment, housing, and resources, but it was also an opportunity to educate about the whole continuum of services that are available to many of these individuals. And another misconception that was more from the American with Disabilities members was that this was actually a step backwards, that they felt that this was going to lead to more people being put on LPS conservatorships. It was going to lead to people being sent to state hospitals. And so they saw this as a step away from deinstitutionalization from years and years ago. And so it was a great opportunity to really speak to, actually, this is the opposite. This is a path away from LPS to try to provide services prior to going down that road. So I think, we've also sent materials out to our first responders and hospitals and EMS. It's been a big kind of lift on getting everyone informed and educated on what the program is and intends to do.
And I want to turn to San Mateo next, but I wanted to give you a chance to speak to the housing that you've been able to build with the BHBH funding.
Right. So our county was able to obtain some BHBH funding, and we have 39 units that are dedicated to behavioral health. And it's not just solely for the CARE program, but our CARE program clients will receive priority housing in those. And that exists among other various housing resources that we already have in our community. So I know one challenge that many people continue to speak to is, how do you project how many petitions, how many clients are going to go through this project, and how do you know there's going to be enough, right? So I'm hopeful that when the time comes and we do have individuals a part of the program who do need housing, that we'll have something available.
Thank you, Emily. So now I want to turn to our panelist who's joined from San Mateo. And for the rest of the counties who may not know, San Mateo recently went live in July. So we're excited for them to share what they're learning on the ground, and joined by Ali Hoppus, Nick Zwerdling, and Jonathan Villarreal. And that's the first time I've said any of those names out loud. So hopefully I got a little bit close. But Ali, what are those, maybe introduce us to what's happening in San Mateo, and then share any immediate lessons learned, particularly around outreach and education from your recent implementation.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name's Ali Hoppus. I'm the clinical services manager for this program. So we have blended our care court team with our AOT team, and so far we've been relatively busy with care court. We have done a significant outreach with the community. We do have a monthly meeting in San Mateo County that's a coordination with local law enforcement and different CBOs and behavioral health programs. And so we've presented to all of these teams to tell them about care court, specific CBOs and our regional clinics, and anyone who's interested presenting in our local NAMI chapter. And, the more we share about care court, the more, someone says like, oh gosh, you need to come talk to our other team over here. And so that's led to more and more presentations. So we're really trying to get the word out, do some myth busting, and also share, how to get the process started, whether they're doing a petition or for our county, we created a referral option where they could call or email us, and then we will do the outreach, the engagement, and see if they meet criteria and submit the petition.
And then you talked about, I think it'd be helpful for, counties who are on the other side of that implementation, just about to implement. You talked about some of your approaches to staffing and how you staffed your care work on the BH side. Can you speak to how you have approached that?
Yeah, so again, we're blending AOT and Care Court. So on one hand, San Mateo County has had AOT since 2016. So on one hand, we have some like established staff who are familiar with, going out into the community and working with folks with serious mental illness who are not engaged and having to do that delicate balance of building rapport and engaging them into some kind of service. And I want to say, Nick here has been with the team since 2016. So we're very fortunate there. Plus expanding with additional clinicians, a peer support worker. We have a mental health counselor. And we brought on Jonathan, who is our legal office specialist. So he helps us with data tracking and the petitions and making sure everything is perfect on the legal end. So that's been very helpful as well.
Maybe Jonathan, if we want to bring on Jonathan, sharing some initial insight on some of the first petitions. So not the specifics, of course, but lessons learned about those petitions and working with referral partners and getting the right information. Anything that you have to share with us there?
Thank you. I would say that some of the biggest insight that has really worked for us is collaborating with everyone involved in the court process, the public defenders, the county attorneys, the judges, and court staff. I think that really helps us learn what new challenges come with care and what is the most efficient way to approach those challenges. Some things that we did learn that came up was there were some questions about the Care 101 form or the MH declaration form. Originally, some courts thought that was required in a petition filing. However, since the petitions can be filed by third parties such as family or other first responders, they may not fill out an MH declaration form, or they may not include as much information because they obviously wouldn't have access to patient information. So it's very important to kind of specify what kind of evidence is going to be accepted, and who files the petition will depend what kind of evidence they can provide.
And then just to clarify, Michael asked a question in the chat speaking to this, Jonathan. And Michael, no. So in addition to the Care 100 form, there are two options. One is the mental health declaration, which Jonathan just mentioned. The other is that declaration of evidence of 5250 or involuntary treatment. Another thing that you mentioned regarding petitions, and Nick, if you could speak to this, you mentioned on the, what is a successful petition? And we talked about in our prep call, a successful petition isn't necessarily that somebody goes through care. A successful petition means that somebody gets connected to treatment. Can you speak to your approach in San Mateo about connecting outreach and making sure that people get connected to the right level of support and treatment?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Swerdling, Program Specialist for AOT and Care Court. And at San Mateo County, we really pride ourselves on building rapport with our clients. That goes for AOT and now Care Court as well. And so the way that we've done it here is we have two options to get people into the care process. They can refer to BHRS, and we can engage clients and then maybe file a petition if necessary later on, or individuals from the community can just file the petition. And for those who actually don't meet criteria, we're not going to just say, sorry, we can't help you. We can help families get connected to various teams like our FAST team, mobile support. Even some of those referrals are already connected to clinics, and we've collaborated with those clinics, making recommendations for social rehabs or other forms of residential treatment. So we've had a lot of success so far in just connecting people to care and collaborating with current providers.
Thanks, Nick. And, we're going to move on and hear from Butte as well. But, Allie, one thing that you had talked about is the before and after. It was difficult for your team to project how many petitions you would get and be responsive to that. Anything you would recommend to other counties who are trying to figure out how to project how many petitions or additional clients, like Nick mentioned, maybe served through another means?
It is definitely difficult, and I know that a lot of the Cohort 1 counties kind of reported having these high numbers of projection and then getting a smaller amount. We're very confident here in San Mateo County that we're going to get a good amount of petitions. Again, what our approach in San Mateo County is to, even if someone doesn't meet criteria, we still want to do our best to connect them to something, because people usually are reaching out to us because they don't know where else to go. And that sometimes creates more work on our end, but there aren't a lot of options for people out there sometimes. As far as, how to manage that, I know that some counties, it's like, this is the criteria and you either meet criteria or you don't, and I will work with you if you do. But I think this is a program that a lot of people are excited to join our team. Hiring wasn't as terrifying as I thought it was, or I thought it would be. So we got a lot of support to kind of create the staffing that we thought we might need, and here we are.
Thank you, Allie. So now I want to turn to Jen Stofa and Sarah Frohawk from Butte. And it sounds like you all are on target, and we would love to hear more about your planning efforts and what's happening in Butte.
Just waiting for all the screens to switch around. Good morning. So I guess first I would definitely have to give a shout out to all the folks that walked before, because I think our team really benefited from not being a Cohort 1 implementing county, and to being able to kind of see how that has really worked out for a lot of other folks. So huge shout out to everybody else on the call that has really kind of paved the way for the rest of us to ride on your coattails. I think for us specifically in Butte, something that was really helpful to us is we also have a few collaborative court programs that have gone through some recent systems improvements. One in particular is our mental health diversion program. And I think we had a lot of lessons learned around that referral process, assessment process, screening process, collaboration with the court, coordination with the public defender, with county counsel, with the district attorney's office. And I think that really helped Sarah and I think differently about how we would implement Care Court, anticipating that it would be fraught with some similar lessons and challenges around who qualifies, who doesn't qualify, what do you mean this person doesn't meet criteria or meet eligibility, what does that look like, and how we really wanted to focus on messaging out to our stakeholders first. So I think we really pivoted our process to understand very clearly internally at behavioral health for Butte County what we were going to do. I think we felt very much like it was important for us to set the tone as the county behavioral health agency. And if we could be really proactive in our own internal process, by the time we involved stakeholders, we would already know kind of the direction we wanted to go. And then it was easy, I think, for our team to kind of get on board with us, right? Versus starting out kind of with the uncertainty of, well, we don't know what this is going to look like. What does everybody think? So I think we started meeting in like January, February, right, Sarah, of this year. So, and we met, I think, every couple weeks internally just as behavioral health, and then started our stakeholder meetings in June. And we've been meeting every 3 weeks since then with the court and the county council and public defenders and all the key folks to talk about what this will look like for the teams. I think for us too, the thing that worked out really well for us, and I don't know how many other counties are in this position, but Glenn County, who's our neighboring county, was a Cohort 1 implementer. And so our Superior Court has a partnership that they also support Glenn County since they're adjacent to us. So our court already had done a lot of this infrastructure building and had been in those like stakeholder groups. So we also really benefited from our court having a shared process with a neighboring county. So I don't know how many other small counties might be in a similar situation or close to other counties that might have been in that first round, but that was really helpful to us as well.
And pivoting to staffing, you know, in our prep call, you mentioned that you all are having a relatively small staff for care, including a supervisor, clinician, counselors. You also mentioned integrating peers onto this team. Can you tell us about your experience using peers in similar work and how you intend to use them as part of care?
Yeah, I can start, and then maybe Sarah, you can add what I might miss. I think Butte County has been a big champion for the use of peers in our workforce for a really long time. We've used them in our housing teams. We've used them in our crisis teams. We've used them in our outpatient services. And we're very fortunate to have a very strong, I think, peer community champions as well. And I think in listening to a few of the key webinars earlier this year and really looking at those strategies around engagement, who's really the best people to go out and engage folks? Not necessarily our clinicians, even though they're great at what they do. Sometimes our peers can connect with folks on a different level and can have those conversations in a way that are intentionally less clinical, right? To help support at least trying to get folks in the door in whatever way we can. So I know Sarah also oversees an innovation program that we've been doing that uses peers or counselors, even with lived experience. So I don't know, Sarah, if you want to speak to those successes and how we are kind of looking at that for CareCourt.
Yeah, I would say that definitely for our innovation project that specifically does outreach in our homeless population, we've seen a lot of success with peers being able to connect folks in ways that our other staff just can't. You know, they have that lived experience and they can really draw folks in. And so, you know, we're thinking that that's definitely going to translate over into our CareCourt team. You know, they're going to be reaching out to similar populations. And so the hope was that we would be able to have as many peers as possible be a part of that process.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Jen. I want to turn to Christy McDonald with Monterey and hear about their experience and what they're thinking about in Monterey. So, you know, we'll switch the videos, but Christy, while we're heading into that, if you wouldn't mind sharing about your planning process and what other counties might find helpful in planning for implementation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat what other people have already said, but I think we are doing in Monterey County a lot of the same things. I think we've leveraged a lot of our existing relationships in our other mental health courts, specifically our LPS conservatorship team. So we have a lot of the same players in that regard. We've been meeting with our Our court has really taken the lead of coordinating the big meetings. We've been meeting, and I'll say I'm from county council, so I have a slightly different role than sort of the behavioral health folks. But I've been working very close with my behavioral health team on trying to really drill down to the nuts and bolts of like, who is going to be responsible for what part of this process? What department is going to be handling this part of the process, so that we can kind of have a better idea of what staffing might need to be available. How are we going to kind of absorb this new aspect of all of our assignments, so that we can be prepared to get going come December 1st. But huge thank you to Cohort 1 who's gone before. We're definitely trying to leverage those materials and not reinvent the wheel. So I mean, I think again, ditto to everything that's everybody else has already said from their counties.
And Christy, one thing that you mentioned has been helpful is thinking about it very concretely. Like, okay, somebody has a petition, where do they go? Once they get the petition, who do they contact at BH? Can you think through, or can you speak to some of those logistics that you've been tracking down?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's like, we want to get like into the weeds with this and like, okay, so, the court gets a petition. Who is the court notifying at behavioral health? So we've been setting up, like generic email addresses that box can just be assigned to whatever staff, so that we don't have to change our workflow every time staff changes. It's those kinds of pieces of, what is this communication flow when we get an actual petition from another, a non-behavioral health petitioner. We've been focusing on our outreach more, as opposed to just sort of having a generic, like, hey, this is what CareCourt is. We've been trying to sort of have a more tailored message to specific interest groups. So for example, last week we met all the police chiefs of all the jurisdictions in Monterey County have like a monthly meeting, and we were invited. So the court, Judge Culver and behavioral health and myself and the public defenders, we sat on a panel. We went and we addressed all the chiefs of police, and we provided a more tailored presentation to like, what would law enforcement want to hear about CareCourt, which is a different message potentially than you would want to give to family members who, are going to be viewing this from a completely different standpoint. So I think we've been trying to be mindful in our communication, and we don't want to sort of get ahead of ourselves. Like, if we're not fully, prepared to go live, we don't want to like blast out a bunch of information and then people come to the court and start asking a bunch of questions or trying to file petitions because they don't understand it's not live yet. So we're trying to be very methodical and targeted in our outreach to the community.
Yeah, thank you. And you also talked about calendaring out and figuring out the days and trying to plan around that. It seems like you're a very analytical brain, but talk to the group about what that process and what it helped you think through.
Sure. So, obviously I'm coming from the county council perspective. I care about filing deadlines. I care about service deadlines. I care about deadlines because courts care about deadlines, even though I have a very collaborative public defender who will probably waive notice defects and things like that because we're trying to be a team here. We always strive to do it perfect and then, beg for forgiveness when sometimes we don't meet that bar. But we literally just mapped out the whole like CareCourt process from the day one being the date the petition is filed. And because there's a lot of deadlines that are referenced in the code. And I realize this is not necessarily a group of attorneys, but I do encourage everyone who is going to have a regular role in this process to at least sit down and read the CARE Act. It's not, I know it's probably kind of boring for some of you, but it is really the Bible of what we are going to be doing. So it is worth a read at least once through, start to finish, just so you kind of get that like big picture. But we mapped out the statutory scheme, like this is step one, and then the next step happens, you know, X number of days from that. Some deadlines are court days, and some deadlines are calendar days, and some deadlines are, you know, not specified, but you presume a reasonable period of time. And, you know, so it's helpful to just kind of see, you know, how many potential hearings there are. So for like a care plan, if you reestablish that following year, like you potentially have 17 hearings from start to finish for that one case. That's helpful to conceptualize when you're thinking about staffing. How many hearings for one case am I going to have an attorney and a behavioral health person and, you know, potential other players who, you know, public defender who are going to have to be in that courtroom for each case. So that's kind of, again, we've been getting as kind of concrete as we can.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. And it sounds like, you know, as the courts are implementing, they're really working with each other, with BH to make sure, you know, there is time to engage, especially in that early phases where engaging voluntarily in services, giving enough time, working collaboratively with the courts to meet those deadlines, but also reflect the individual needs of that case. So the last question I wanted to pose to you is, you know, you talked about one of those challenges is you don't necessarily know who your care population is. Your team is most familiar with those most severe cases, but you think that care will really address that middle ground of people who aren't yet at that far end, but need to be engaged early in services. Can you speak to that and what your team is planning around that?
Yeah, I think we're really truly hoping that in Monterey County and throughout the state, really, that care is going to be an off-ramp before LPS, that we are going to hopefully get people provided services, provided housing, and engaged in a way that they aren't filling our hospital beds on 5150s and 5250s, that they're not spiraling so bad that by the time they get to an LPS, you know, referral, that we're looking at IMDs. It is, of course, a benefit to the entire system if we can serve people in the community. Just, I mean, even if you didn't care about the actual person that you're caring for, like from a financial standpoint, like it makes financial sense to care for people before they are so profoundly sick that they can thrive in the community and they just need that additional support. So obviously we are hoping to really capture some of those people. I heard yesterday that the Department of State Hospitals is hoping to have some sort of a referral mechanism for the folks who are competent, who've been to state hospital, they're competent to stand trial, but by the time they get back from state hospital, they've more or less served their maximum term on whatever charge they had. So they plea and then they get released back onto the streets. State hospitals, like, we just put this person back together. We would really love a mechanism where we could potentially get those folks either connected to care or connected to outpatient services. You know, we literally put them back together. They're psychiatrically stable. We've sent them back. They're going to be released from jail. Like, we need a safety net for those folks. And I personally, you know, I haven't seen the legislation that they're proposing or who they're lobbying, but I thought that was actually a really good idea of the population who is struggling, who may need these additional supports, because sometimes, as the behavioral health folks here know, you know, somebody goes into custody, if they're on a felony, they're there for up to 2 years, especially if they're incompetent, you know, they're going to state hospital. Their case has been closed with behavioral health. We're usually not tracking them anymore until, oh, they're back on the streets. And now, you know, hopefully they've not committed a new crime. Hopefully they've, you know, stayed on their meds, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them return to substances. So I'm hopeful that some of these pathways might, help sweep in these people before they're really bad.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. And I know we've had a very active Q&A or chat and a lot of requests for TTA materials. So we will be following up. I wanted to open up for just a few minutes for some questions, but knowing we'll also be following up on the chats. So if you do have a question for one of our panelists or for HMA or a county partner, please feel free to enter it into the chat now. And we can follow up as we need to. And then Lisa Urin just asked, how do you get people, how do you refer people from the community for help filing petitions? And wanted to make sure you're aware of the self-help if it is unrepresented individuals who are looking for help. And then also mention for the system partners who may not have access to self-help, because they are represented, we are going to be developing a series of materials, resources to help petitions. And then just point out some counties have chosen to set up a referral partnerships with other petitioners. And Nick mentioned this earlier, but reaching out to County BH to actually file the petition and set up pathways and partnerships to do that. So that, and then another question from Michael, if there are reports of respondents being the petitioner, does anyone have anything to speak to that?
I have heard that happened in, obviously that hasn't happened in our county yet, but I had heard that happened. I believe Orange County had a few who came, they were mostly like in jail or hospital, but I don't know the outcomes.
Yeah, so it could be the case where, if somebody is in those situations, the respondent is in jail or justice involved, they can work with the individual to be the petitioner, right? If that person is interested in being connected to services, they can file out the information themselves. And so that's definitely an option. Thanks, Allie. Well, I just wanted to pop up. So we're wrapping up and wanted to point out some next steps for us to highlight. And again, we'll be reaching out following the requests in the chats. Love seeing counties pile on requests that they're looking for. But we have a few things. So meet with your county liaison and review TTA opportunities. A couple of the county panelists mentioned how their liaison has been a helpful, their HMA liaison has been a helpful connection in sharing information, getting questions answered. Christy sends a lot of questions to her HMA liaison, and we love it. Connecting with answers. Also, viewing the CARE Act Resource Center. We do have the trainings for petitioner or for first responders as petitioners. So we'd love to share that with you to facilitate those conversations in your own county. Also join the listserv, make sure you're receiving our updates about available trainings and TTA opportunities. And we do have a few of these pinned trainings about, where to start. We've mentioned the communications toolkit and some other resources in this training. So if you're looking for something, you're not sure exactly where it is or what's available, please reach out to us and we can connect you, including different FAQs on the website. So we appreciate all of our partners today, both from at the state level and then hearing from our county panelists and hearing how implementation's going. If you have questions, follow-up requests, please feel free to reach out to us at our email address and let us know how we can help you. And so we'll be in touch soon, and thanks for joining.